Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into it. Strapping on our boots, wading deep into the muck, you could say, of one of Hollywood's biggest creative what-ifs. We are talking about Shrek. You know, the huge 2001 hit launched that massive franchise.
Yeah.
But we're going way back to its really swampy, almost totally forgotten origins.
Yeah, because the Shrek you know and probably love is this polished, feel-good animation machine, right?
Totally.
Our mission here is to dig into the source material, the early drafts, and uncover this radically different version that got abandoned. It started life, believe it or not, mid-90s, as this gritty, low-budget thing, a mix of live-action miniatures and, well, pretty rough CG.
And here's the absolute core of it, the kind of heartbreaking part that anchors this whole deep dive. Before everything changed, before Mike Myers, the original Shrek voice, it was comedy legend Chris Farley.
And he wasn't just attached. This is key. Sources confirm he'd recorded, 80 to 90% of his lines for the film? An incredible amount.
80 to 90%.
Yeah. Which makes this whole story just a fascinating lesson, really, in critical thinking about how art gets made. The shift from what they were calling an edgy fairy tale nightmare to the icon we know now, it just shows how huge external forces...
Those are technology, studio politics.
Exactly. And, sadly, human tragedy. How those things can completely reshape a creative project. You really have to try and picture it. A Shrek who was, genuinely vulnerable. A sort of teenage rebel with serious daddy issues.
Wow.
Voiced with that unique, manic, but also deeply sensitive energy that, only Chris Farley had.
It's hard to even imagine. So to really grasp what was lost, artistically speaking, we absolutely have to start at the beginning with the material that caught Hollywood's eye in the first place.
Let's do it, where it all began.
Okay, so the absolute genesis point is William Steig's 1990 children's book, Shrek. And let's be clear, this was not your average sweet bedtime story. It was fundamentally subversive, a real jab, almost anarchic, at that whole classic Disney fairy tale thing.
Oh, absolutely. Steig's original Shrek in the book, he was unapologetically awful. I mean, truly monstrous, mean, super ugly, terrorized villagers just for laughs.
Right.
And his whole destiny in the book was to marry this equally hideous witch and then have a bunch of grotesque goblin triplets. The illustrations even had this deliberate, grotesque charm. It was clearly meant to be anti-establishment.
And Hollywood saw that potential, that kind of weird edge pretty quickly. Back in 1991, Steven Spielberg actually bought the rights.
He did, for his studio Amblimation. The idea then was a traditional, hand-drawn animated feature.
And the casting ideas for that version, this is a mess.
That's wild, right? The names floated were Bill Murray as Shrek and Steve Martin as Donkey.
That's a whole other comedy universe right there. Just imagine that movie.
It really is. But that version died pretty fast. Amblimation basically folded after their movie.
Yeah.
Balto didn't do well at the box office in '95.
Okay.
So the rights lapsed, but not for long.
No, because 1995, enter the brand new studio, DreamWorks SKG. Producer John H. Williams pitches the Shrek idea to Jeffrey Katzenberg. And this is where the studio politics really kick in.
Right. Because Katzenberg was fresh off his, let's say, dramatic split from Disney.
Understatement.
Yeah. And he decided to greenlight Shrek, but specifically as what multiple sources called a punishment project.
A punishment project? That sounds ominous. What does that actually mean in studio terms?
It means it was deliberately set up almost to fail, or at least not to be a priority. It had a really strict low-budget cap, around $60 million, which was low even then for animation. And it was specifically for animators who were kind of exiled.
Yeah, exile.
Yeah, or maybe deemed not quite ready for the studio's main, more prestigious projects. Like the big one at the time, the all-CG film Ants.
Oh, okay, so if Ants was the star pupil getting all the resources.
Shrek was basically Animation Siberia. It was Katzenberg's way of keeping those teams busy on something he probably didn't expect much from. Just keep them working on this weird ogre thing.
So pre-production kicks off in 1996. And the directors they initially had, it's almost unbelievable. Rob Letterman and, wait for it, J.J. Abrams.
At J.J. Abrams.
The guy who went on to do Star Trek, Star Wars Lost. He was working on what did you call it, an ogre puberty movie?
He was involved early on, yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows how seriously they were taking that initial dark and edgy tone. The clear goal was to make something that was absolutely not Disney, which for Katzenberg post-split was kind of the whole point, right?
Right. Anti-Disney was the mission statement. Okay, so That brings us to the actual how they plan to make it. The technical approach, which sounds ambitious is maybe putting it mildly.
Maybe delusional is close. They attempted what you called the hybrid gamble.
A hybrid gamble, okay.
It was a tech approach that, looking back, and even according to sources then, was pretty much doomed. The plan was super unconventional. They were going to shoot physical, live-action miniature sets for all the fairy tale places.
Like actual little models.
It's exactly. Physical models. And then composite these really clunky, early motion-captured CG characters into them.
Why? I mean, why that specific mix? It sounds incredibly complicated.
Well, the simple answer is cost. It was cheaper than going full CG, which back in 96, 97 was still astronomically expensive and time-consuming. PDI was doing Ants, but that was the 18 big budget project.
Right.
But the artistic result of this hybrid method, it was apparently terrible. When they did technical tests, the integration just didn't work. Early CG characters looked plasticky, moved awkwardly.
That uncanny valley thing.
Big time.
Yeah.
And trying to light those rough mocap characters to match the real physical sets. It just created this jarring visual clash, like two different films stuck together. The tech just wasn't mature enough.
It sounds like a mess waiting to happen. And the look they were going for design-wise was just as weird, right? The designer, Barry E. Jackson.
Yeah, his brief was to create looks that were creepy yet endearing.
And I love this detail from the research. Shrek's bedroom in his dump was supposed to have actual, like, rotting fish lying around.
Yes. To show just how gross and, well, grounded in filth he was, they were really committed to the grime.
Okay.
And the script, by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who later did Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Their early drafts really matched that dark edge. They stuck pretty close to Steig's original themes. Shrek was literally battling his parents' expectations, trying to prove himself through quests.
So his parents were actual characters nearby.
Yeah, they lived nearby. His home village was called Wartreek. And Farquaad wasn't just a short joke, he was a genuinely oppressive tyrant figure in this early version of Duloc.
The key thing here, the tone difference, is huge. It sounds like it was all about, well, puberty, as you put it, family drama, feeling like an outsider.
Absolutely. Zero rom-com vibes, no singing donkey trying to cheer him up. It was aimed at a more adult, cynical comedy audience.
Which explains the casting stories, too, like Nicolas Cage turning it down.
Right. He apparently passed because he was worried kids would see him, Nicolas Cage the actor, as a real ogre. That's how harsh the portrayal was meant to be.
But then Chris Farley comes in 1996, and he didn't just read lines, did he? He really invested himself.
Totally. He poured himself into it. Sources say he heavily influenced the script with his improv, adding layers of insecurity and, crucially, vulnerability to Shrek.
That's the core, isn't it? The emotional difference. What did his performance actually sound like, based on the bits that have surfaced?
Well, the surviving recordings and descriptions suggest it was really energetic, but also quite raw. He was playing Shrek as this deeply insecure, almost self-hating teenager, complaining about his life, lamenting being an outcast, actually dreaming of having friends, all while living in this literal garbage dump.
So that shame about his appearance, which is kind of there in the final film.
It was front and center in Farley's version. It was the character's main driving force, his central neurosis.
And he wasn't the only interesting name in that original cast. Eddie Murphy was still Donkey, right?
Yes, Murphy was attached early as Donkey, but Fiona was completely different, originally voiced by Janeane Garofalo. Yeah, and her Fiona was apparently very cynical. A dethroned princess, still cursed, but definitely not looking for romance. Much more sarcastic and world-weary.
And the supporting cast had Alan Rickman, Marion Ross, Linda Hunt.
Rickman, Ross, and Linda Hunt is this significant character, a fortune teller named Dama Fortuna, who guided Shrek. It was shaping up to be this amazing ensemble for a really edgy, dark comedy.
But despite all that talent, the technical side was failing.
Overwhelmingly so. PDI did animate some rough tests. There's that famous 1996 clip of Farley's Shrek dancing to James Brown's I Feel Good.
I think I've seen that. It looks rough.
It does. And when Katzenberg saw the more complete tests, combining that rough CG with the miniature sets, well, that's when the word abysmal really started getting thrown around.
So the project was already in deep trouble because the tech just didn't work. It looked bad.
It was teetering.
Yeah.
Definitely. But then came the moment that just changed everything. The catastrophic turning point. December 18th, 1997.
Chris Farley died at just 33. And DreamWorks' reaction was immediate, right? They just shelved the film.
Overnight. Just stopped everything. They had, as we said, 80–90% of his dialogue recorded. But here's the thing people ask. Why was it considered irreplaceable? Couldn't they just get another actor? like Mike Myers eventually did, and re-record those lines, maybe using the same script.
Yeah, why couldn't they just swap actors? Was it just because Farley had done improv?
It was more than just the improv, though that was part of it. It was the nature of his performance. Farley wasn't just doing a voice. He was channeling his own very specific, manic, vulnerable, kind of self-deprecating energy into this self-hating ogre character.
Ah, okay.
His unique timing, his specific line reads, the way he balanced the humor and the pain, it was so intrinsically Farley.
Yeah.
Trying to get someone else to just mimic that performance using the same script would have felt hollow, probably ghoulish, and it just wouldn't have had that same authentic vulnerability he brought. The character, as conceived then, was fused with the performer.
That makes total sense. So the tragedy wasn't just emotional, it created a genuine creative and logistical dead end for that specific version.
Absolutely. And frankly, it gave Katzenberg the perfect, unavoidable reason to kill a project he already disliked because of the failing technology. He screened those hybrid tests again after Farley's death and basically said, look, it looked terrible, it didn't work, it wasn't funny anyway.
Case closed for the original vision.
Completely. The entire concept, the hybrid approach, the dark tone, the Farley performance, all scrapped. And they immediately started planning a total reboot in 1998.
And this is where the Shrek we actually know begins to take shape.
This is the pivot.
Yeah.
They committed fully to 100% CG animation with PDI, aiming for that smoother, more palatable Pixar Disney look. And they started casting for a new Shrek. Dan Aykroyd was considered, apparently.
Oh, interesting.
But they landed on Mike Myers.
But Myers coming on board wasn't just a voice swap. He had conditions, right? Big ones.
Huge ones. He demanded massive creative changes. A complete rewrite of the fairy tale elements. Get rid of the parents, ditch the original cursed backstory, lose all those dark, cynical family dysfunction themes.
And the accent, that was Myers too.
Famously, yes. He felt the Scottish accent gave Shrek a more working-class, sympathetic, almost lovable quality compared to the harsher original concept.
So the entire emotional core shifted. Fiona became the more traditional princess, played by Cameron Diaz, replacing Garofalo.
Right. Farquaad's story became more of a satire on Disneyland and corporate conformity, less about actual tyranny. The whole tone flipped from that edgy dark comedy to a full-on romantic comedy with buddy elements.
And characters like Linda Hunt's Dama Fortuna.
Gone. Axed immediately because she just didn't fit the new, lighter, more streamlined rom-com structure.
The original directors, Abrams and Letterman, they were out too.
They exited, yeah. Andrew Adamson and Vicki Jensen came in to direct the reboot, steering it towards the version that became that global phenomenon. It's genuinely wild to think how close we came to getting something so different. Technically flawed, maybe, but dark, complex, and powered entirely by Farley. And that leaves us with that huge what if, doesn't it? If Farley had lived, would his sheer charisma and comedic genius have somehow saved that technically abysmal hybrid version? Could it have become this weird adult animated cult classic?
Or would the terrible visuals have just sunk it completely, like that movie Monkey Bone you mentioned, which also tried that kind of live-action CG fantasy blend and really bombed?
It's impossible to know. The tech was a major hurdle. But it's fascinating how, even in the rebooted version, traces of Farley arguably remain.
How so?
Well, Mike Myers himself admitted that when he was developing the Shrek voice, particularly that signature growl, he was subconsciously influenced by the cadence he heard in the original Farley test recordings he listened to.
No way. So a little bit of Farley sound is still in there.
Seems like it, yeah. And for listeners who want to see glimpses of that lost version, there are artifacts. The 2001 Shrek DVD had extras with some of the original gritty concept art.
Okay.
And maybe more revealingly, in 2023, that 1996 test footage, Barry Jackson worked on Shrek fighting a knight or mugger in that proto-duologue that actually got officially released on YouTube. You can see the rawness for yourself.
We'll have to look that up. And it's interesting, thinking about the final franchise, the successful one, even with all the changes, Shrek's core insecurity, right? His vulnerability about being an ogre, his fear of rejection.
That fundamental emotional layer, yes. It really does feel like a nod back to the self-hating teenage vulnerability that was so central to those early Farley drafts. That psychological seed somehow survived the reboot.
So quite a journey we've tracked. From William Steig's really savage little book through this doomed technical experiment and centering on Chris Farley's unfinished, apparently quite powerful performance. It's just a textbook case, really, of how tragedy, technical failure, studio politics, how they can force these massive creative pivots, sometimes clearly for the better commercially.
And Jeffrey Katzenberg, looking back, called the reboot the right call. Financially, commercially, it's impossible to argue it launched a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Yeah.
But it leaves us, and you, the listener, with this really provocative final thought to mull over.
Okay.
If Chris Farley had lived, if he'd finished recording, would DreamWorks have actually dared to release that technically flawed, abysmal hybrid version? Would they have banked everything on Farley's star power to overcome the visuals, possibly killing the Shrek brand before it even started?
Or the other possibility.
Or would his performance have been so undeniably special, so potent, combined with that edgy adult script, that it might have forced them to actually invest in fixing the technology? Could it have pushed them to create something truly unique, maybe even groundbreaking, a genuinely dark, complex, adult animated feature that we just never got the chance to see? Think about that commercial risk, the guts it takes to back a vision that breaks the mold, even when you have a star like Farley attached.